I wasn't supposed to be on that flight. My name is Ryan Blake. I'm a 33-year-old software engineer from Seattle, flying back from a last-minute conference in Kuala Lumpur. I was exhausted, jet-lagged, and honestly, just wanted to sleep through the ride home. Gate C2. That's what my boarding pass said, but in the chaos of delayed announcements and broken intercoms, I ended up at Gate C1. The flight attendant scanned my pass without blinking. I boarded, found seat 21A window view. No red flags, nothing unusual. Until I looked at the safety card. Malaysia Airlines, flight MH370. I laughed at first. Some kind of rebranding or code share, right? But then I checked the date on my phone. March 8th, 2014. My phone blinked. No signal, no network, no GPS, just one chilling notification. Flight mode enabled, forever. I stared outside as the engines roared to life. I should have screamed. I should have run. But something inside me whispered, "You were meant to be here." If you boarded the wrong flight, and it changed history, would you get off if you could? The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. And for a while, everything felt normal. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisles with tired smiles. The man next to me, mid-40s, Japanese accent, quietly solving a Sudoku puzzle. In front, a baby cried. Somewhere behind me, someone snored. But I couldn't stop looking around. Every time I reached for my phone, the same thing happened. Nothing. No network. No Wi-Fi, just the glowing lock screen and the date. March 8th, 2014. No way to change it, no way to update. It was like time had frozen. At first, I convinced myself it was a tech glitch. Maybe the airline used some weird system that disabled everything. Maybe I was just overthinking. Until I spoke to the flight attendant. "Excuse me, what time do we land in Beijing?" She smiled politely. 8:40 a.m. local time. "And today's the 8th?" She paused. "Yes, Saturday, March 8th. My heart hammered in my chest. I tried to play it cool, asked a few more questions, where she was from, how long she'd been flying, casual. But every word she said, every reference to current events, felt off. She hadn't heard of COVID. She didn't recognize the name Zelensky. When I mentioned Elon Musk, she said, "The PayPal guy?" That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just on the wrong flight. I was in the wrong year. Panic rose like a wave, but I bit it down. I couldn't afford to draw attention. Not yet. I stood up, headed toward the lavatory just to collect myself. As I passed row 17, I felt it, a sudden jolt. Not turbulence, not a shake. More like a pull. A strange woman was sitting alone at the window seat, her head turned slightly toward the aisle. She wore a faded gray shawl and had a look in her eyes that froze me mid-step. "You don't belong here," she whispered. I froze. "I'm sorry?" She didn't blink. "You weren't supposed to board this flight, not in this timeline." I backed away. My hands trembled. "What did you say?" But she had already closed her eyes, resting her head as if she hadn't spoken at all. I locked myself in the bathroom, stared at my own reflection, and whispered, "Wake up, Ryan. Wake up." But I didn't. The plane kept flying. And for the first time, I wasn't sure it would ever land. How long could you keep the truth hidden in a plane that was never meant to arrive? I didn't sleep. For 6 hours, I sat in silence, replaying every second of the boarding process in my head. The wrong gate, the broken intercom, the absence of time. My reflection in the mirror had looked pale, unfamiliar, like something was already peeling away. But I kept coming back to her. Row 17, seat F, the woman with the gray shawl. There was something ancient in her voice. Not in age, in knowing. Like she'd lived through this moment before, or many times. I waited until the cabin lights dimmed. Passengers dozed. A quiet hum took over the aircraft, the lullaby of altitude and denial. Then I stood, walked down the aisle like a man possessed. "Excuse me," I said softly. Her eyes opened before I finished. "I remember you now," she said, voice low, accent undetectable. "You've been here before." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible." She didn't argue, just gestured to the empty seat beside her. I sat. She turned her gaze to the clouds outside. "This plane was never meant to land. Not in the way people think." I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" Her fingers traced the fogged glass. "We are in between, like a needle skipping on vinyl. Time is looping. The others don't feel it. But we do." I leaned closer. "What are you talking about?" She turned to face me. "There were others like you. A man in 2019, a girl in 2023. They came from beyond this moment, but the flight took them anyway." I stared at her. "Why me?" She gave a sad smile. "Because you still remember what the world forgot." Then she reached into her coat and handed me something. Small, cold, metallic. A flight recorder. Black, scorched, cracked. But the black box was never found, I whispered. Her voice darkened. "Because you're still carrying it." I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking into the drink cart as I stumbled back to my seat. People began to stir. A baby started crying again. But something had changed. The plane was tilting, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but not in a way you'd expect. Not like turbulence. It felt like descent. Only there were no announcements, no blinking seatbelt lights, just a long, low hum, and the feeling that someone, or something, was piloting from somewhere far, far beyond the cockpit. Back at my seat, I opened my laptop. It wouldn't turn on, until it did. One terminal window, one blinking line. "You are the recorder. Start remembering." What if your memories weren't yours, but warnings meant to be decoded? It began with a single tone, not a ringtone, not a PA announcement, just one long, unnatural frequency, like the hum of a dying machine. I yanked out my earbuds. Others noticed it too. Heads turned, confused murmurs. Then, silence. But on my laptop screen, the blinking cursor had stopped, replaced by a single line of text. Ping received. Origin unknown. I typed, my hands trembling. From where? No answer. But then the cabin lights flickered, just once. And behind that brief stutter, I could feel it. A second rhythm, almost like breathing. Something was alive in the systems. I stood up again, this time no hesitation. I marched straight to the galley where the flight attendants gathered, whispering. One of them, a young man, looked pale. He caught my eye, pulled me aside. "You felt that, didn't you?" he said. "What was that?" He pulled a phone from his pocket. An old model, maybe 2012, clearly not connected to any network, and showed me the screen. A message had appeared on his Notes app by itself. "You are off course. Recalibrating." He looked up, terrified. I didn't type that. None of the crew did. But this has been happening since we crossed the Andaman Sea. I froze. "We're over the Andaman?" He nodded. That's when it hit me. The last known location of MH370, right before it vanished off radar. I bolted back to my seat, eyes scanning the overhead map. The system was off. Nothing displayed, just static. So I opened my laptop again. Another line had appeared. Course altered. Trajectory outside of human projection. You are not passengers. You are variables. My breath caught. This wasn't a flight path. It was a program. We were part of it. Then came the next line. One word, selection. I slammed the laptop shut. Across the aisle, the woman in row 17 was watching me again. Not smiling, not blinking. She mouthed a phrase I couldn't hear. I leaned forward, heart pounding, lips barely moving. What did you say? Her eyes glistened. Only one of you will leave. At that moment, the plane lurched, not a dip, but a pull, sideways, like reality itself had tilted. Oxygen masks dropped. Passengers screamed. Crew shouted in confusion. But no alarms, no distress calls, no cockpit voice. Just the quiet, growing truth that this plane was no longer flying through the Earth's sky. It was somewhere else. And something, or someone, was deciding what would happen next. If the plane wasn't lost, but chosen, what was it chosen for? The scream wasn't human. It cut through the cabin like a blade, raw, distorted, metallic. For a moment, I thought it came from the intercom, but there was no announcement. No one in the cockpit was speaking, because the cockpit was no longer there. The door had vanished. Not open, not broken, gone. Where there should have been controls, pilots, guidance, there was only a blank wall of metal pulsing faintly with light from the emergency system. People were panicking now, calling out to loved ones who couldn't answer, pushing at windows that showed only clouds and static beyond. Some screamed, others prayed. Me? I opened the flight recorder the woman in row 17 had given me. It was old, blackened like it had been through a fire. But it had no labels, no airline markings, not even screws, just a single sliding latch on the side. When I opened it, nothing came out, until I heard it, my own voice. If you're hearing this, it means you've looped. Static. There is no pilot. There is no destination. You are inside the echo of a lost decision. Another voice, female this time. We tried to steer it, but the system responds only to anomalies, to those who remember. Then a chorus of whispers, overlapping, dozens of them. Different years, different names, all saying the same word. Repeat. I dropped the box. Passengers around me were crying. One man clutched a rosary so tight his palm bled. A woman screamed that her baby had vanished, only to find the child sitting 2 rows back, completely silent, staring straight ahead. Nothing made sense anymore, except this. The black box wasn't from this plane. It was from a future version of this same flight, and I had already been here. I turned to row 17 again. The woman was gone. Her seatbelt hung open, shawl folded neatly. In her place was a note scribbled in uneven handwriting. You don't escape by surviving. You escape by remembering. Suddenly, my laptop screen lit up again. A new prompt appeared. Ready to transmit memory? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then the screen changed one last time. Only one can return. Input name for extraction. A blank field blinked, waiting. One name, one soul. I looked around at the terrified faces, people who didn't know they were already lost. And I understood the final, sick twist. The plane wasn't lost. It was searching for the one who could carry the story back, and it had chosen me. If remembering meant condemning the rest, would you forget to save them? It didn't feel like falling. It felt like being pulled, like something had gripped the plane by its very atoms and was dragging it downward through layers of space that didn't belong to this world. The lights flickered again, then died. Everything was silent, except for the hum. That low, godless hum. Steady, mechanical, almost breathing. No one screamed anymore. It was like the cabin had accepted death. I didn't. I gripped the seat in front of me, knuckles white, eyes darting to the windows. But it wasn't sky out there anymore. Not clouds, not stars, not ocean. It was fractured, like the air itself was breaking apart into shards of memory. I saw flashes of my childhood, my father's face, my old apartment, the time I got lost at a carnival. All of it flickering across the window like a film reel unraveling. And then I saw me, another me, sitting calmly across the aisle in the same seat, watching this version of me panic. He didn't blink, didn't move, just mouthed one word: choose. I stumbled into the aisle, bodies slumped in seats, breathing but frozen, like their minds had disconnected or been taken. The cockpit wall was gone again, now revealing a tunnel of light, stretching forward into infinity. No pilots, no instruments, just a blinding path. And standing at the edge of it, facing the unknown, was her, the woman from row 17, alive, awake, waiting. I reached her. "You left," I whispered. She shook her head. Number I stepped forward. "Where does it go?" "To wherever you're willing to forget." She turned to face me fully now. Her eyes were not human, not entirely. They shimmered with something I couldn't name. Years, maybe. Or lives. "There's only one escape, Ryan," she said. "But it requires a sacrifice." "What kind?" "You must give up the truth." I clenched my fists. "But the truth is the only thing I have." "Exactly," she said softly. "Which is why you're still alive." She gestured behind me. I turned. A hatch had opened near the rear of the plane. Wind roared. Beyond it, ocean, real ocean. Now not fractured, not memory, a door back to reality. "One step," she said, "and the others stay lost." I stood there, breath ragged, torn between two impossible roads. Leap and return, carrying nothing but survival. Or stay and carry the truth into oblivion. And then I heard them. The passengers whispering my name. Not with voices, with memories. They were inside me now. Every story, every scream, every second of this flight. All of it inside my head. I took one step toward the hatch, and another, until I stood on the edge, between salvation and sacrifice. And I jumped. If your return meant erasing every life you just lived with, would you still call it survival? Salt, wind, the unmistakable sting of sunlight through closed eyelids. When I opened my eyes, I was lying face down on a stretch of sand, waves curling gently at my feet. I coughed, sat up slowly. Every part of my body screamed in protest. I was alive. Something was wrong. No wreckage, no debris, no plane, just me and the sound of gulls overhead, like some cruel cliché. I stumbled inland, heart pounding, scanning for anything. A sign, a road, even a footprint. What I found instead was a rusted road sign. Selangor, 12 kilometers, Malaysia. I was back. Somehow, I had returned. Hours later, I sat in a police station wrapped in a blanket, recounting my story to two stone-faced officers. When I said the words MH370, they exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. "We've had others," one of them said. "What do you mean, others?" He hesitated. "Survivors. Not many. Not in this condition." I blinked. "You're saying someone else came back?" He avoided my gaze. "We don't discuss those cases." I pressed further. Names, dates, anything. Nothing. Then they handed me a file, a printed page with my name, Ryan Blake, and my passport photo. But something was off. The page said I was declared dead in 2014. "What the hell is this?" I asked. "You tell us," the officer replied. "According to every system we have, Ryan Blake died on March 8th, 2014. You were listed as a passenger on MH370. "That's impossible," I snapped. "I was 33. I boarded the flight last week. In 2025? He stared at me, silent, then handed me a photo. A scanned image of a group of passengers boarding a plane, MH370, and there I was, standing in the line. 10 years ago. My head spun. None of it made sense. Had I always been on that flight? Was I meant to go back? Was this some kind of glitch in time? Or a punishment? I was taken to a hospital for observation, hooked up to machines, tested, scanned, everything normal, except for one thing, an anomaly in my brain. "Your neural activity is off the charts," the doctor said, confused. "It's like your memories are stored in layers, not linearly." "What does that mean?" She leaned in. "It means you're not just remembering your life. You're remembering others. Passengers, voices, a screaming baby, Sudoku puzzles, a rosary soaked in blood. The flight attendants whispered prayers. All of it was still in me. They called it trauma. But I knew the truth. I hadn't just survived flight MH370. I had brought it back with me. What if you returned from a missing plane, and the world said you were never supposed to exist? They came for me 3 days later. Not in suits, not in uniforms. Just quiet men with soft voices and no names. They didn't need to threaten me. They already knew I had nowhere to go. "We just want to ask you a few questions," one said. They took me to an underground facility. Sterile white walls, fluorescent lights. The kind of place designed to erase people, not hold them. In the center of the room sat a chair, metal, bolted to the floor, wires coiled like snakes beneath it. "This is for your own clarity," they said. They strapped me in. No pain, no force. Just a question. "What do you remember?" And so I told them. I told them about the gate switch, the woman in row 17, the second black box, the split in the sky, the other me, the whisper of choose. I told them everything. They didn't write anything down, didn't blink. When I finished, the man closest to me nodded, then slid a tablet in front of me. On it was a neural map, a 3D scan of my brain taken just hours earlier. The scan moved, pulsed, glitched. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "No. This is your memory, playing back someone else's life." He zoomed in. Each memory had a label, time, date, emotion, but not all of them were mine. Some were from other passengers. Some were from other versions of me. Versions that had jumped, versions that hadn't. Versions that screamed and burned and dissolved into static. "You were never meant to survive," the man said quietly. "You were meant to record." "What?" "You are the black box now." They couldn't explain how. They didn't need to. Somewhere in the flight, in the loop, the breach, the timeline fracture, I had become more than a witness. I had become the vessel. Every voice, every choice, every scream trapped in that endless flight, stored inside my neurons like magnetic tape. And now, they wanted to extract it. But I felt it. The moment they activated their machine. All those memories, the real ones, the forgotten ones, the impossible ones, screaming to stay alive. They weren't data, they were souls. I shut my eyes, and I made one final choice. I leaned forward, spoke into the recorder they had placed in front of me. If you find this message, it means I failed to stop them. But if you feel like you've been here before, you probably have. The plane never crashed. It was swallowed, and it's still flying, somewhere between memory and regret. I pressed send, a burst of white light, and then silence. Back at my apartment in Seattle, an old voicemail plays on a loop. "Hey, it's Ryan. I'll be home soon. Just remember me if I'm late, okay?" But no one remembers him anymore. Because to the world, MH370 never came back. But he did. If you were the last witness to the truth, would you carry it or bury it?